All right, let's talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide. As we get closer to spring ball, we're starting to figure out what the Tide are going to look like as a football team for the 2025 season, which obviously is a big year for Caleb DeBoer. The way last season went and certainly how it ended is totally not acceptable down in Tuscaloosa. Good news is it looks like the future may be a lot brighter than people think at Alabama. We've got a great report. Before we get into that, though, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, there's this prevailing thing going on in the media right now that the Tide are dead. That Kalen DeBoer is a dead man walking. That they're going to be terrible this upcoming season. Jalen Milroe's gone. What's going to happen at quarterback? This is a team on the decline. This feels like the late 1990s all over again. Just things are trending in the wrong direction. But when you actually look at the numbers, and we got a great report highlighting that this Alabama Crimson Tide team is a lot better than people think. Let's throw up this report. This is courtesy of Athlon Sports. Bill Connolly, analyst for ESPN, created his first top 25 SP Plus rankings for the upcoming season. The way the SP Plus is ranked is based off of previous 3 season success, off-season recruiting metrics, and the skill of the returning players. Connolly ranked the Crimson Tide at number two overall in his first rankings of the season, only sitting behind the national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. The clear and present star in the making, Ryan Williams, certainly helps keep Alabama as high as they are, even with their quarterback Jalen Milroe heading to the NFL draft in April. I think this is actually a really indicative situation here of where the Tide are going forward, right? A lot of people think they're dead, but we're seeing a transition. And the fact is, the talent is there for Alabama. We've seen it the past couple seasons with flashes, and we're seeing Kalen DeBoer build his team. A lot of question marks going forward, but I think the future, like I said earlier, is very bright in Tuscaloosa. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, but first, Alabama fans in the comment section below. Obviously, there's a lot of young stars that are going to have to really turn their careers in the right direction for Alabama to get this team headed back to where it needs to be. But give us one guy no one is talking about that you think is about to become a huge star for the Crimson Tide, a guy that's kind of sliding under the radar, freshman, transfer, just a young guy waiting to step up. Give us that up and coming Alabama superstar. Put him in the comment section below. But Mize, over to you. What are your thoughts on this latest report involving Alabama?
Yeah, Nick, I think this is good news for the Tide. I think this is expected because if you look at what they've been doing recruiting wise, what they've been doing transfer portal wise, this is a team that's done a lot of really strong stuff. So I think the fact that people are saying, oh, this team is down in the dumps, it's going to be awful. How can they possibly recover? They're losing a guy like Jalen Milroe. They're losing all of these players. I think it's kind of overblown a little bit. I think it's a little bit exaggerative, and I think Alabama is in a much better situation. Obviously, someone ESPN very smart doing all of the analysis, bringing in everything over a 3 year period of what they've been able to do. And this doesn't even count Jalen Milroe into the situation as well. He's gone, so he's not a factor anymore. This is a team ranked second in all of college football, just behind the national champions, Ohio State, who've poured even more money than Alabama has into their program. They've done absolutely gobs and gobs of it. So I think Alabama, they're in a pretty dang good place, if you ask me. I think that this is a team that is set to rise up. I think they're going to have a huge bounce back here this year because we're already hearing great stuff. We're hearing, Keelan Russell at school. He's enrolled. He's doing good things in the weight room. He's coming in, working hard, staying late. We've heard the reports about it as well. So I think this is a team. It's led really strong. It has a good leader at the top. I think Russell looks like very interesting young quarterback coming into the program. But on top of that, Alabama, they've brought in a lot of solid players this year. They've got 3 5 stars. And then when you look at 24/7 Sports Grade, 5 stars is like kind of like the top, I don't know, 30 players or something. It's kind of fluid of how you get a 5 star rating, but there's numbers. So those 5 stars are 100, Keelan Russell, number one or number 2 recruit in the country. Then you got Michael Carroll, who's a 98, and Dijon Lee, who's a 98. You got a bunch of guys who are 97, 96s, 95s. You got about like 6 or 7 other guys that I would say are 4 star plus. Their potential to be a 5 star player, they're just as good as these guys. So there's a lot of great talent coming into this Alabama program. And I think if you look at the SP Plus ratings, it shows this team is poised to not bounce back. They're poised to be great. They're poised to be college football playoff contenders. They're poised to be national championship contenders. This is a team that I think is on the rise, and I think people are going to be very surprised about what they put on the field next season. Now, I think there's right to be upset with how things went, but not every year is perfect. There's a lot of factors come in. Things can be rough. There's up and down seasons. First year coach, you got to give it a little bit of slack. I think that this is type of deal here that Alabama, there are a lot of good points here. And I think when you look at these ratings, that Coach DeBoer has this team going in the right direction. And 2025 is going to be a big year for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. And look, one of the things with Kalen DeBoer, if you look at his entire career, his first year with the team has generally been his worst, right? And of course, this is just his fourth stop as a head coach. But if you go back to his first head coaching gig, that was in 2005. That was with the Sioux Fall Cougars of the Great Plains Athletic Conference. Again, we're talking NAIA, very small, kind of D2-ish level of college football. He had one conference loss his first year. He had no conference losses the following 4 seasons, right? How about with Fresno State? 2020, he had 3 conference losses out of 6 games. The following season, 2021, he had 2 conference losses out of 8. Big improvement there. And of course, Washington, 2 conference losses his first year in 2022, none his final season in 2023. So he generally goes into a team. They do a lot of good things, but he builds his roster, understands how the game is played in that conference, and then dominates it. Right? That's been the train with Kalen DeBoer. And really, until we've seen anything else, that's what we're expecting for Alabama going forward. And the fact that they're just crushing in the recruiting ranking, top 3 classes, both in 2024 and in 2025, is obviously a great sign because they are absolutely laced with talent. And one of the things no one really remembers when it comes to last season is that anytime you transition from one program to a completely different program in terms of head coach stylistically, scheme, strategy, and all that, there's going to be friction, right? Because Nick Saban and his staff, they recruited guys to do X, and now you've got DeBoer and his staff, they're taking those guys and they're forcing them to do Y, right? And there's going to be some issues with that. It's the old adage you get in the National Football League, right? How can I make dinner if you don't let me buy the groceries? Well, Kalen DeBoer and his staff were making dinners where Nick Saban's staff bought the groceries, right? There was going to be some issues. There always is, right? We saw with Saban himself. His first year with Alabama wasn't that great. Even his second season ended in total disappointment. People forget they got obliterated, humiliated by Utah, I believe, in the bowl game after losing to Florida in the SEC championship game. It takes time to get your guys, right? And I think that's what we're hopefully seeing from Alabama right now. Now, here's the one positive side. If Kalen DeBoer goes into the season and does poorly, then we know it's time to move on because their roster is stacked, right? There's not going to be any question of, well, he didn't have, a talented group. He didn't have enough good players. If you look at the data, whether it's recruiting classes or if you look at the SP Plus rankings, this is a very talented roster across the board. So if DeBoer and his staff do not live up to expectations, then we know he can't handle being a head coach. And that's important too, right? Because one of the things that can happen is you can bring in a good head coach, but let's say the talent is really, really bad. You don't really know how to evaluate them, right? Do we have, if we won 7 games or 9 games or whatever, and it was a 5 or 6 win talented team, it actually was a good coaching job, right? But if you win 9 games and it's a 12 win talented team, it's a bad coaching job. You got to go. This is a 12, 13 win talented roster, which means that's what we need to expect out of Kalen DeBoer. And look, there's new quarterback situation. There's going to be a lot of interesting things to follow over the course of the spring football season, summer workouts, and of course into training camp. Which leads me into my question for you, Mice, about Alabama going forward. Is there one situation where if Alabama doesn't return to the college football playoff, that you don't fire Kalen DeBoer? I think this is a question people are asking. Is if it's an injury-filled season, if the quarterbacks don't work out, do you give him a pass or do you say, listen, you take us to the CFP or we're done? What are your thoughts there?
I do think there's one situation where you don't, and that is with the addition of Ryan Grubb. I think that's a lot of things that people are putting in stock into. If the offense comes out and you have a young quarterback and on offense, you absolutely light up the SEC. You have guys having career years, you're putting up tons of points, and the offense clicks well. I think you don't necessarily fire him because you can see there was a change made. They brought back his guy and Ryan Grubb, and then the offense starts to click and goes a little bit better. We know last year the offense started out very slow. There was a point in time where Jalen Milroe, people are like, why is this guy playing quarterback for Alabama? This guy should get benched. Then we see him transform at the end of the season. Obviously, Heisman Trophy contender is a guy doing a lot of really great stuff. And Jalen Milroe, obviously now he's getting talks about getting drafted first, second round for a quarterback like Milroe. So I think the offense starting slow last year, it helped or hurt them, excuse me. It's going to help this year with Ryan Grubb. He's got his guy back. I think Coach DeBoer if this offense absolutely just turns on and from get go is foot to the pedal and we see a huge improvement here, I don't think necessarily if the season falls apart somehow, like I said, with injuries, whatever, that you go ahead and just throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that's an indication point that, hey, this team is going forward. It's going really good. So I look to the offense. I look to the addition of Ryan Grubb. That's got to really be successful for DeBoer. If they're struggling, they've got to have gotten that move right.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. I think it's something to really think about. Like if Alabama goes 9-3 again and misses the top 12, but the offense looks great. Russell looks like a star in the making. Do you keep Kalen DeBoer? And you would have told me 2 minutes ago, I'd have said no, you fire him. But you bring up a really interesting thought there is that in modern era college football, it's basically like the NFL, where you need the quarterback coach combination and that pipeline of quarterbacks to be solid, steady, and consistent. If you don't have that, you won't win titles. We've seen this with Georgia over the past few years. They have great rosters. I mean, half their team gets drafted in the first round, by God's sakes. Half their team played on Super Bowl Sunday, but they're out winning titles, right? They're flaming out in the playoffs. They're losing in conference championship games. Why? I think it's because they have issues at the quarterback position, right? As much as people wanted to hype up Carson Beck, he was very flawed. They don't have that elite guy. They don't have that guy that can take over games, right? Even if you look at Ohio State as a team that won a title this season, they really were able to do it because Will Howard finally elevated his game and played at an unreal level, right? The game that a lot of people thought he could play. And if you look at the competition in the college football playoff, they just seem to go up against a lot of guys that just weren't playing their best football. Most of the time, you need a Tua, you need a Jalen Hurts, you need a Trevor Lawrence, you need someone at that level that can take you all the way and to win games as a quarterback, right? That is the modern era of college football. Even Michigan, right? They had McCarthy, even though they were running football team, they had a franchise quarterback there behind center that when the moment was needed for a big play or a big first down, he could take it over. You need that guy and you need to have that relationship. We saw that again, Michigan McCarthy, great example. We saw it with Saban and his quarterbacks. We haven't seen that going forward yet with Alabama. Obviously, Jalen Milroe was a holdover. If they have that relationship, Grubb, DeBoer, Russell, most likely, and it looks good going forward. Even if they go 9-3, miss the top 12, whatever, I agree with you. I think that you do keep DeBoer and keep this thing rolling. But regardless of all this, I think the final point here to really focus on is this Alabama Crimson Tide team. Listening to the media, they're dead. They're going to win 4 games, 6 games. It's the dark times again. It's the early 2000s, late 90s. Not so, in my opinion. I think they have a great chance to be a great contender going forward. If not 2025, which they probably will be, certainly beyond.